Welcome. So you've built a backend service, and now you're wondering, how do I securely connect this thing to the rest of the world? Well, if that's you, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to build our very first Hello World API with Amazon API Gateway. We're breaking down one of the most essential services in the cloud. Let's get right into it.
Okay, so picture this. You've written some absolutely brilliant code. Maybe it's a Lambda function, maybe a service in a container, and it's running perfectly on your machine. But now you hit that classic challenge, right? How do you actually expose that logic to the outside world in a way that's secure, scalable, and reliable? For your mobile app, or a web client, or even another service. And that, my friends, is exactly where API Gateway comes in. The best way to think of it is like a highly secure, super efficient front door for your entire application. It sits out front, handles all the incoming requests, checks their credentials, and then directs them to exactly the right place. And the best part? It's a fully managed service, which means you don't have to worry about provisioning or maintaining a single server. It just works. So let's just take a step back and really break down what this service is. For pretty much anyone working with serverless architectures, API Gateway is almost always going to be your go-to starting point for letting the world talk to your backend.
At its core, it's a fully managed service that acts as a central control point, a traffic cop, if you will, between your users and your backend. It takes care of all those critical, but let's be honest, tedious tasks like traffic management, security and authorization, monitoring, and API versioning. This frees you up to do what you do best. Focus on writing your core business logic, not building and maintaining a bunch of complex API infrastructure.
Now, API Gateway can connect to a whole bunch of different services, but its most common, and I'd argue most powerful, pairing is with AWS Lambda. So let's take a closer look at exactly how that integration works. Okay, so when you're hooking API Gateway up to Lambda, you really have two main options. On one side, you've got the non-proxy or custom integration. This gives you absolute fine-grained control over everything, but it's complex. You have to manually map every single request parameter, which can be a real headache. But then, on the other side, you've got proxy integration. And honestly, this is the recommended starting point for almost everyone. It's just so much simpler. It basically takes the entire raw request and passes it straight to your Lambda function. The beauty of this is the flexibility. You can change how your function processes the request without ever needing to redeploy the API Gateway itself. It's a huge time saver. All right, enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty and actually build something. We're going to create our very first Hello World API, and we're going to use the exact method we just talked about, a REST API with a Lambda proxy integration. We'll break this down into a super simple three-phase process. First, we'll whip up the backend logic with a Lambda function. Second, we'll build that front door with API Gateway. And third, we'll deploy it and see it all work in action. Easy, right? So, starting with phase one, the backend, all you have to do is hop into the Lambda console, choose to author a new function from scratch, pick your favorite runtime, say Node.js or Python, and then just paste in the basic Hello World code. One click on deploy, and bam, our backend is officially live and ready to go.
And you really don't need to be a coding genius to see what's happening here. The function just peeks into the incoming request, looking for a parameter called greeter. If it finds one, it uses that name to create a personalized message. If not, it just defaults to a friendly hello world. Simple as that.
Now for phase two, building the API itself. Over in the API Gateway console, we'll choose to build a new REST API. Then we add a resource, which is really just a part of the URL path. In our case, /hello world. On that resource, we'll create a method, but we'll set the type to any. Think of this as a catch-all for any kind of HTTP request, whether it's GET, POST, or whatever. And here comes the most important part. When we select our Lambda function as the backend, we make absolutely sure to check that little box for Lambda proxy integration.
This quote really just sums it up perfectly. By using that any method with the proxy integration, we've created a ridiculously flexible setup. Our Lambda function gets the full, completely unaltered request from the client. That means no annoying mapping, no extra configuration fuss, just pure, direct communication. It's beautiful.
Okay, our backend is built, the front door is configured. Now it's time for the fun part, deploying our API and seeing it work live on the internet.
And deploying is incredibly simple. You just choose to deploy the API, and you create what's called a stage. A stage is basically a snapshot or a version of your API. This is how you manage different environments, like dev, staging, or prod, without them stepping on each other's toes. For this demo, we'll just call our stage test and hit deploy.
And as soon as it's deployed, API Gateway gives you a unique invoke URL. This is it. This is the public, live endpoint for your API. This is the address we're going to use to talk to our Lambda function from literally anywhere in the world.
So let's give it a whirl. We can use a simple command line tool like curl. We'll send a GET request to our new invoke URL, tack on our /hello world resource path, and then add a query parameter at the end, greeter equals John.
And there it is. Success. The API Gateway got the request, passed it directly to our Lambda function, which then found our greeter parameter and sent back that personalized Hello John message. We've just built and tested a fully functional, completely serverless API from scratch. How cool is that?
So yeah, this Lambda integration is insanely common and powerful. But it is so important to understand that API Gateway is way more than just a proxy for Lambda functions. It can be the front door for almost any service you can imagine. This really shows you its true versatility. You can integrate API Gateway directly with any public website or web service. You can have it proxy requests to Amazon S3 to serve up files, or even stream data directly into Amazon Kinesis for real-time processing. It truly is the central hub for all your backend services.
For example, with an HTTP proxy integration, you could slap a managed secure API layer right in front of an entire existing website or some legacy web service. And you could do it with just a few clicks, without changing a single line of backend code. It's that powerful.
So what's the big takeaway here? API Gateway isn't just a tool, it's a whole strategy. It gives you a single, manageable, and incredibly powerful entry point that simplifies how the entire world interacts with your backend, no matter what technologies you've built it on. We've just walked through building that all-important front door, so the real question now is, what incredible applications and services are you going to build behind it? Thanks for joining this explainer.